is saying you can keep the interpreter only needs the mic. So you can move it around.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second Special Education Committee meeting. My name is Scott Schmerlson, and I am the board member for Board District 3 in the San Fernando Valley. Before we begin this meeting, I have a few announcements and housekeeping items to share. Today's meeting is being conducted as a hybrid meeting with a majority of the majority of the members in person. And I'd like to welcome two members that were not able to make our last meeting. Ms. Kelly Bradford, so happy to have you, a parent community rep representing Board District 1, and Ms. Pam Cohen. Okay, Ms. Pam Cohen, who is the regional leader of Decoding Dyslexia California. And I do appreciate the members of the public that were able to join us in person and via Zoom. As accustomed, we will be taking public comment towards the end of the meeting. And you can find the agenda and the materials on the temporary Board of Education website, achieve.lausd.net/BOE. And then click on the November 2nd date to find the materials and live stream. Today, the Division of Special Education will present on the reclassification process for students with disabilities and on the Special Education Action Plan as stated in the LAUSD Strategic Plan. These agenda items are topics that my committee members and the public were interested in learning more about. So, if you are interested in providing suggestions for future agenda topics, you can do so by going to BD3 www.ed.info/sped Topics 22. As it has been my practice, once I open up for comments after each presentation, committee members, you are welcome to ask questions and provide feedback to our presenters. In addition, remember to be compliant with the Brown Act. We will not be discussing any items that have not been properly agendized for today's meeting. With that said, let me introduce Ms. Leila Rondeau, the administrative coordinator, who will introduce herself and get started with the presentation. And according to the agenda, item number 1 is the reclassification process for students with disabilities. Okay, Ms. Rondeau.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I thought I was second. I was getting all cozy in my seat. It's nice to see everyone tonight. I'm Leila Rondeau, Administrative Coordinator for Division of Special Education over Instruction. So I'm going to be presenting to you. We heard last meeting from a researcher who had looked into the reclassification of students with disabilities who are also English learners, and the question arose before this committee as to whether we in the district have a process for helping to feather out or separate when there is a English language acquisition issue from a disability. And in fact, we do have a policy, and we have had a policy in place for several years. So we were going to talk about that with all of you today. And our partners from MMED are here as well. We're delighted that they came. They've been wonderful partners with the Division of Special Education for a long time. So I will go ahead. Okay, so there's 2 ways that an English learner with a disability can reclassify. You'll notice on the slide there or in your papers that there's the blue square. That's the regular reclassification process. So regardless of whether they're going the blue route or the yellow route, there are 4 required criteria for reclassification. You see them there on the screen. It's the assessment of English language proficiency, teacher evaluation, parent opinion and consultation, and comparison of student performance and basic skills. These are set through the California Education Code. And as you can imagine, the 2 that are the most challenging for our students with disabilities are the assessment of English language proficiency. That's the testing that the students typically do on the LPAC or the alternate LPAC. And also the comparison of student performance in basic skills. So typically what we would look at for a student who's reclassifying is how are they performing in their English class? Are they meeting their grade level standards there? So we do have a number of students with disabilities who go through the regular reclassification process, who meet these criteria. And in fact, my friends in MMED gave me some data that I wasn't able to put in the presentation, but I do have here for you all. So as of October this year, we've had 170 students with disabilities who have reclassified using that blue method, Bulletin 5619.11. So you also see there that yellow square. So this is the other process. It's the IEP team reclassification process. And this is specific for the students for whom the blue box did not work. It's a second possible option. So I'm going to go deeper into that in this presentation. So for students who have an IEP and they didn't meet the regular reclassification, and by the way, that regular reclassification process can happen in any year. So as the students are going through school, they have the availability of being reclassified at any time. But once they have had English learning and EL instruction for at least 6 years, and they don't meet that criteria for the regular process, they qualify for this IEP team reclassification process. So you'll see here on this slide that there is a graph. Because we have students who start with our school district in ETK or TK, it tells you in the bulletin which year they become eligible for this process. So for a student who starts in ETK, they'd be eligible for this process in 4th grade or regular K in 5th grade. And of course, every year after that as well. And we do have a bulletin on this. It is Bulletin 6890.3. It's in its third iteration, and we got this process actually through Jerice Butterfield, who was a educator in Ventura Unified School District. So they were the ones who came up with this process, I believe. That's my memory serving. But the essential difference here is that we're looking and comparing students with disabilities to their peers who have similar disabilities, so that we can try and rule out that it's not the disability that's preventing them from being able to reclassify. I'll get more into that. So this is who can use this. As we've talked about, they need to have been enrolled in U.S. schools for 6 years or more and receiving 6 years of English language instruction and services. The student needs to be attending school regularly so that we can rule out that, that we know that they have received the English language instruction, the designated ELD. And also the student has to have an active IEP. It cannot be an initial IEP. So we don't want people to give students an IEP and say, well, let's see, this is maybe a route for you to get out from being an English learner. Of course, we want to be serving the students who we know have disabilities. And the student has not met at least one of the 4 criteria for reclassification. So the determination is made by the IEP team members, and we have some specific criteria as to who needs to be there at that IEP team meeting that's a little bit different from our regular meetings. As usual, we want to see our parent or guardian and the student. At this meeting, we must have an English learner representative there. So typically, that is that's the designee from the school site who is over English learning instruction. Typically, they receive a differential for that work. Also, of course, the special education teacher as usual and the gen ed teacher as usual. But we also, sometimes in our IEP meetings, we have an admin designee because we have so many IEP team meetings. At this particular meeting, it must be the school administrator. And the reason for that is it's a very serious decision. We want to make sure that we're not depriving a student of instruction that would benefit them. And we don't want to willy-nilly say, like, every student, yeah, sure, like, you don't need this anymore. So we want to make sure that an administrator is there and signing off that this process has been done correctly and that we are absolutely sure that this is not needed anymore for the student. Okay. So these are the actual image here is a little bit young. Just pretend these are like 4th or 5th graders, although they look a little bit like 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds to me. But just imagine, okay? So what the IEP team does is they look to see, does the student's English language proficiency, is it commensurate with a native English-speaking peer with a similar disability in the same grade level? So for example, if my student in blue is my long-term English learner or potential long-term English learner with a disability, are they performing at or near the same ability level as my native English-speaking peer who has a similar disability in the same grade level? So if, for example, you have a class full of students and you have a student who's an English learner and a student who's not an English learner, and they're both performing at the same level on the test, we can deduce that it may not be the need for English learning instruction that is impacting the student who has been identified as an LTEL. So the idea is saying, like, if the student is close to their peers in terms of their ability, then we as the IEP team can say with confidence that we feel the student can reclassify despite the fact that they might not be a good test taker. So there is a process for this, and we wanted to make it thorough without making it too burdensome on school sites. So there's a checklist that schools receive just to remind them of these are the pieces of information you need to collect. There's a records review that's supposed to be done by the special education representative and an EL representative at the school site. So prior to the IEP team meeting, gathering some of the data so that the team can make as informed a decision as possible. And then there's the team worksheet where the team makes the determination as to whether the student meets these criteria for reclassification. and I mentioned this already. So of course, we're working in collaboration with the EL designee, and we want to have the data from both of those worlds. And of course, we all want to support our students. So this is a close-up. I didn't want to give you every single form because we'll be here all night, and I think you get the idea when you look at this one. But this is criterion 1, and this is a big hurdle for a lot of our students with disabilities. The LPAC, as the researcher mentioned last time, the LPAC can be a very difficult test, specifically on the writing portion for a lot of our students with disabilities. So if that's something that they haven't been able to meet the criteria to reclassify using the LPAC, you'll notice that box B. Right? If the student did not meet the LPAC overall performance level of 4, then they could meet that criteria of English language proficiency through other means. For example, analysis of growth in the ELD areas, so looking at their present level of performance from one year to another, comparing their formative assessment data with that of an English-speaking peer with similar disabilities in the same grade level. So if the IEP team determines that this is the right move for the student, and I believe at our last meeting, Jackie Goldberg was talking about how this is an important process because we want students to have room on their schedules when they get to middle and high school for electives, and to envision themselves as college going, and to have the time and space to be able to take as many courses as possible. So if that team makes the decision that, yeah, actually the student should reclassify, everyone signs, and it gets processed through the local district English EL coordinator. And so that's the presentation. What questions do folks have?
Your reference to students with disabilities, of course, that's a broad range of students. Would you say, or do your statistics show that most of these students that you're referring to are students with like an SLD?
Yes, that is the majority. So students do have to have an IEP. That's the student with that's the disability criteria. So as long as the student has an IEP, they qualify for this process.
But would you say the majority of the students are with a specific learning disability in the category where they're kind of long-term and having trouble reclassifying?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So is effort being made for those students to get the proper type of structured literacy intervention? I know this is newer in the district, but I'm wondering, like, how concerted an effort that has been made to make sure the students are getting those services to help them reclassify.
So some students would need a structured literacy intervention for sure. I would say that there are other SLD students who don't need an intervention. They would need structured literacy embedded in their Tier 1 teaching. But yes, we have been training teachers on structured literacy intervention.
Thank you.
Presentation. It was very interesting, especially talking about the IEP. I noticed that is very important for the program. I have a few questions and concerns. One of those being, how do we get support for our deaf students or students with no native language, like Spanish, that's spoken? But my biggest concern is recognizing or getting a program that has ASL language as well. Because a lot of people who use ASL have been deprived. So we've been focusing on English learners and that classification because many of our deaf students, they're quick to be classified as English learners and then use that program. And also in that program, I noticed there's on LAUSD.com, there's a program called BGC, Bilingual Grammar, Bilingual Grammar Curriculum. And it's a program or curriculum that the district approved, and it provides explanation and expansions for the district to be able to use and to be included in the IEP as well. So ASL should be included in the IEP or for IEPs. And trilingual as well should be included. So how would you be able to support the deaf community? Because they should not be excluded, and that is what one of my concerns are.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bauman. So I would say that there's a few things. One is that students who are deaf or hard of hearing can opt out of some domains. That's my understanding of the LPAC. I don't know in depth about that, whether it's 1 or 2 domains, and I don't know if our med colleagues happen to know off the top of their head. Do you know? So that's one possibility, is that students who are deaf or hard of hearing can reclassify through the regular reclassification process, with perhaps listening being a domain that wouldn't be assessed, obviously. Another piece would be that they could reclassify by being compared to other deaf students. So if other deaf students are having similar results, then we could understandably, as an IEP team, say that the student would be eligible for reclassification. With respect to the bilingual grammar curriculum, it's interesting, I just got an email about that today. So I've reached out to our colleagues in med, because I wanted to know if it was through the world language lens, if that was one of the pieces under there, and I'm wanting to learn more about it to answer the question I received by email today. But I'll ask Angela to come forward.
Good evening, everybody. Angela Sandoval, Multilingual Multicultural Education Department. Just a few things with regards to ASL, students who've received formal ASL instruction. When those students enroll in a California public school for the first time, their language classification defaults to English only. So students who enter our district for the first time and a parent has reported that their language, or that the language that they communicate is ASL, very clear that we make that, we understand that clearly, or that we have that clear in mind, right? Because there is a difference between, as we're learning, ASL and students who use sign language to communicate in a language spoken at home or their native country, right? So two sorry, I'm nervous. This was last minute. So ASL defaults to English in our school district. When a parent has communicated with us via home language survey that they speak or that they communicate in sign language, we have to ask a few more questions. Has the student received instruction or formalized instruction in ASL, because that's different, right? If not, then we ask more questions in terms of what language is being used in the home to communicate. We've had a few cases where it's señas, which is in Latin American countries. And recently we had sign language that was Nigerian-based. Okay, so we have to explore that. The state of California says we still have to determine if there is a need for language support, because these students are potentially bilingual, and we have to ensure that we provide instruction in ASL, in English, right, to support the student academically. Yes.
Thank you, Angela.
And then I have a question to follow up. Thank you for your response and your answer. So I need to clarify a few things. So the information that was presented to us is very well, but I want to clarify some of the data there, and specifically in regards to the deaf community, and also to let you know that ASL is a bona fide language in itself. It shouldn't be something to be reclassified as English, because it is not that at all. So if you're trying to use ASL for English learners, that will totally deter your goal. And it's not appropriate and it's not the right information. The student needs bilingual support or trilingual support. So we must separate the two. ASL has its own syntax, grammatical structure, rules, and usage. And the students who sign are visual learners. So they're able to communicate and express themselves through the vocabulary through ASL, which is beautiful. So that is what we need to focus on. That's the information in that regards we need to focus on. And what kind of materials and resources can we give to provide them language? And most of them do not speak. Most of them can't hear at all. So using that research or data that you presented to us now for them would be a hindrance and a harm to them and cause even further language deprivation. Forcing them to learn English that they'll never understand, that they'll never speak, that they'll never be able to hear, they won't be able to hear a word in English. So it's useless and, like I said, causes further language deprivation, and they won't learn. I mean, we're using this to learn math, history, and all the basics that they need. And so this data is just incompatible for those deaf children. And I would like to encourage the team to really think more carefully on how you present the data clearly on English learners and explain that the classification, what it is and why. Don't just say this is for the deaf community because it just doesn't work for them. Now, ASL needs to have its own specialist, a person who can really identify and name and who signs and knows the culture and is able to teach them English. So one of my biggest concerns is that the deaf community is not involved in these processes. And Marlton School is the only deaf day school in California where they have deaf children. And excuse the interpreter. So there are millions of deaf children in the state of California whose parents are very frustrated in the sense of literacy for their children and asking why can't they graduate? What's going on? What is wrong? And we're failing them. The system is failing them. And so we need to research and have this data that's appropriate. And so that's what my concern is when I hear ASL English being lumped together. Absolutely not. It just does not pan out.
Thank you. Lydia Costa-Stevens, Executive Director of the Multilingual Multicultural Education Department. Agree, and there is so much for us to learn. We look at every individual child, one child at a time, name, need, and asset. That is how our district is driven. But I will tell you, when students enroll and complete the home language survey, one of the first things we recommend, because generally it is the classified people in the front office, is that they pull in the EL designee and the APIS to determine what services have been rendered before or might need to be rendered before even the initial LPAC can move forward. The problem we have is Ed Code says we must test students within 30 days with the initial LPAC. And sometimes that does not line up with, honestly, doing what's right for kids and trying to meet every single need when you have some schools who may have dual identified students, that's the term I use, EL, students with disabilities, at high percentages. We are getting better at that. For the last 2 years, we focused on concentrated training with our APISs, our EL designees, on how to flag those enrollment packets right away and meet with parents to try to understand exactly, because filling out a home language survey, by the way, does not tell you the story of language at a home. That is an ed code process that must be followed. It's the conversations that happen afterwards. So my apologies for any statements of the space that we're learning in, and I would love anything you can send me for us to continue to research and work on this. This policy was revised. It is now a dual policy between MMED and the Special Ed Office. Just background, Luna and I have been advocates around this work for over 20 years because of who we are, our children's needs, and the schools that we serve. So there's passion around this, but you're absolutely right. I don't know this work the way I wish I did, but I appreciate any information, anything you want to send me to read and look at. I will tell you that the success of this work has resulted in about our long-term English learners, approximately 50% of them used to be dual-identified students with disabilities. Now, of long-term English learners, 30% are students with disabilities. We are getting better at catching it sooner and not letting students live in a space where they don't get the services. So I'm sorry we're not there yet, but doesn't mean we won't get there. And I have other data that I can provide as needed. So my apologies if I said or we interpreted anything. And to Angela, we like to give everybody an opportunity to lead. And it was her first time and she's very nervous and I'm very sorry, but we like to give people opportunities to lead. So I appreciate your grace.
So one program I strongly recommend is the BGC, Bilingual Grammar Curriculum, and I've seen it in action and it works. We use it at Marlton School, and I've seen it firsthand. And the deaf children, the students, the hearing, the Spanish, they all benefit from that program. So we have a curriculum for ASL, and a curriculum that includes all the tests, and I've seen just everything work together, and I've seen what difference it's made. And this could be standardized for the whole school district, and I'm happy to share this resource with you.
And I promise you, and I'm promising for Luna, both of us will go visit and dig in and check it all out and connect with you if I may follow up with you again. Thank you.
Hi. What he said, okay? I'm a hearing impaired father of a hearing impaired child, and I appreciate having some of the volume turned up a little bit when speakers are talking softly. What I hear, and I do have another question after this, but what I pick up is that we basically need somebody, a team, who can actually translate from ASL to the English, to what are the differences and distinctions, so that we can determine how to put English in the fashion that they can understand. Because if the syntax is different, you're not going to be talking properly to the child, to the student. And so we don't have enough interpretation in this district. We really should. We're trying to work on it at the CAC. So I'm on his side, and I'll be right there every single time. Now, my other question, though, it goes to the recoupment and the pandemic, the effect that has had on the reclassification. You have a 6-year, the timelines, and everything got skewed. It's either a blip, it's a transient, data. It's not as reliable as it normally might be. So there are a lot of outlier data points. But there's something else that's come to my attention. One of the other officers, I've had some conversations, informal ones, because we do the special education students for the Community Advisory Committee. 2 out of 3 officers had a conversation. 2 of us had a situation where we had our IEPs and we had our recoupment letters that were quantified and we were qualified, and it didn't come up at the IEP. And at the end, we kind of said, hello, I had to do that? So did another officer who happens to be an RSP. Okay, so that's her work. And she had to tell them, I had to tell them. And both times, the real problem lies in the fact that they wanted to end the meeting without addressing it. And I pulled mine out. I'm about to put it up to the screen, to the camera like this, and I said, this is the letter. We're entitled, and it's supposed to be part of the IEP. So I did get some reassurance from one of the team members today that that is not a standard practice, because I asked her the pointed question, are you constrained from answering unless we ask for it? Isn't it supposed to automatically be? And so I asked, how many people aren't getting the recoupment considerations in their IEPs right now? And for the classification, reclassification specifically, I think they need to I'm just going to say, make darn sure that every single one of them are getting that recoupment that they're entitled to, and that the parents do not have to bring it up, because some people aren't as cognizant or savvy. And please go back and take a look. And I'm talking to the board, I'm talking to Superintendent Carvalho, I'm looking right at the camera and saying, take care of it. And I mean it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, JP. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm wondering about students who are nonverbal because of intellectual disabilities. Are they on the same timeline? And if they are, is there any negative effect of waiting those 6 years?
It's a great question. I didn't talk about the fact that there's also an alternate LPAC. So there is another state that another test that the state of California has developed that IEP teams can determine that a student could take. So that would be a test that could be adaptive for a student who's nonverbal, a student who has more intellectual impacts. The students on the alternate curriculum are still eligible for the reclassification through the IEP team process too. So again, it's an either or. Sure, please. Sorry.
And I want to clarify on the 6 year. The state of California determines who is a long-term English learner. The state of California determines who is a long-term English learner, apologies, who is a long-term English learner by the number of years. And that is a policy, of course, that we implement. But in LA Unified, we also have a label called potential long-term English learners. And the philosophy we have now, and why we have outscored every similar district in this state on LPAC level 4, is because we are into prevention. We are not going to have long-term English learners in this district by the time I leave, 4 to 6 years. But we are reducing that because it is about the prevention. You don't give the medicine afterwards. So what we did with the policy change, May of 2021, it is no longer for 7th grade and above secondary. We now include 4th and 5th grade because students start in TK and K, and we want to catch them as soon as possible. But we're not waiting for them to get the label. We're looking at them when they're potential long-term English learners, and we work almost weekly with school site people for dual identified and just English learners.
I just wanted to ask about the data. So I know that you mentioned that 170 students have been reclassified through the regular process, which seems like a very low percentage to me. And so I'm wondering what the numbers are through the alternative process.
So I don't have the alternative process. Oh, you mean the IEP process?
Yeah, the IEP process.
The
That's what I
IEP
mean.
process, this is the data just from August of this year to October of this year. So just for these first 2.5 months. So yes, like Amy said, it was 170 through the regular process, but 1,374, so 1,374 through the IEP team process. So yes, that is a far more robust process, and we have a lot more students who are reclassifying through that.
So dual identified students, we had approximately 3,400 students reclassified last year. About 40% of them are through this process. The other 60% are through the standard process. So again, I count that as very successful because of the partnership and the policy changes. This data is looking much stronger than it has looked pre-pandemic.
I would be interested in the alternate, for students on the alternate curriculum also.
Sure, we can get that to you. I don't have it with me today.
So I guess I want to ask a question that's sort of the reverse in a sense, and if this is not part of the agenda, I'd like it to be another agenda item. But, so you're talking about reclassification for long-term English learners with disabilities. So I have an interest and a concern about our long-term English learners who are long-term English learners because they have not been identified with a specific learning disability. And what is being done to, you're talking about, you know, preventative measures. What is being done to try to flag those students as early as possible so they don't drag out in this world of long-term English learners, you know, and to Jackie's point, you know, being denied the extra electives and so forth, so that they can get the intervention that they need, that they're really maybe not long-term English learners, maybe they have a specific learning disability that's not getting addressed.
So what I often say to people about language learners is that ELs are not a monolithic group. There are several categories, and also depending on years of service. I can tell you right now that we've been working with the Council of Great City Schools, looking at screeners for dyslexia that are critical and might be something we want to reflect on. And in the state, what is available for second language learners, students who have another language at the home, and where do we incorporate that appropriately? Because what we don't want to do is claim that a child may have a certain, we can call it disability or another area of need. We really must be careful to distinguish the language needs and how many years it takes for any of us to go learn, I don't know, Punjabi, I guess Italian might be easier for some of us. But as we look at what it takes for us to learn another language, so we want to make those distinctions. And we work very closely with the Division of Instruction in terms of what is happening there. And the targeted we spot in the 30 to 45 minutes we focus on for designated ELD is that targeted small group time where the teacher responds, acutely observes language and those interactions that are occurring by taking language samples to see what the needs are. So if a student is not identified, we are digging into what are those needs, and they might not have anything to do with having a disability. There may be other needs, and that's why we're also looking. I'm starting to dig into things like SLIFE, schools with interrupted education, students with interrupted education, because many times what we're finding around long-term English learners, there are students who have moved back and forth to in countries in different places, and sometimes our international newcomer students, another typology around English learners, 50% of them start coming to us in 9th grade and above. The other 50% come in elementary, 1st and 2nd grade, and they're missing K-1 experiences. So we're digging into how do we respond immediately with Tier 3 support versus waiting a year or two. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yes, I think partially, but I guess, and I understand the concern. We don't want to over-identify. I totally get that. But at the same time, I think there's been an issue of under-identifying and then having these long-term English learners sort of languish and not get the support they need. And then I know that there's been a little bit of controversy about the screeners and the early screening and language and so forth. I may have some access to information and resources that probably Spanish only, and I know there's scores of languages in our district, but I believe that there's a screener that addresses the Spanish language anyway, so I can look into that and get that information to you.
Oh, go
Just
ahead,
to
go ahead.
try, I mean, it's not a full, complete answer, but I think you bring up a really good question, Pam. I think that part of it is also using dibbles in our elementary schools to try and identify when a student is not progressing and they continually are showing that they're not meeting the grade level progress that we would expect to see. That needs to be a red alarm for our schools, that that student may have something else going on.
Thank you, Pam. We have Charity also with a question from Zoom land. Go ahead, Charity.
Hi. My apologies, I can't turn on my camera, but I'm hoping that this is a little bit, we've had some amazing questions from the panelists, and I'm really grateful to have them on our team this year. But mine is hopefully a bit of an easier question. If a child is reclassified and then starts to decline and starts needing extra help, at what point can either a parent or someone from the IEP team step in and say, we need to have an emergency IEP or an additional IEP? How long would you let that go on before something like that could take place?
That's a more difficult question than I think you, I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you, so I'm going to see what Lydia has to say.
Sorry.
That's good.
State Ed Code requires 4 years of monitoring for our reclassified students. So even beyond the IEP process, we are monitoring. I'm right in the middle right now of monitoring A through G, grades, SBAC, graduation rates, and also earning seals of biliteracy. Our reclassified students are some of the highest percentages in the state who earn seals of biliteracy. So it's not always, everything is not always live in the special ed world once a child is reclassified. But I'm pretty sure in the IEP process, if there was anything that came up with language, they would pull in the school site EL designee.
Okay, I believe Dr. Luna would like to comment.
Hi, thank you, appreciate it. I have a few things I wanted to comment on. I wanted to first thank Ms. Acosta-Stevens for the work that we do together. It's been a real pleasure to work collaboratively with our med group and our SPED group on revising these policies and on supporting our students and on working to reclassify those that can be reclassified. So no, we go a long way back from when we were principals and appreciate really the work and appreciate her always being collaborative. Two, recoupment. That was brought up that there was an issue at an IEP. I just want to make it very clear that our trainings, our message is always that recoupment must be discussed at the IEP. And there is a button that needs to be clicked before the IEP. It should be clicked before the IEP is closed. Really, noting that the conversation has been had and that recoupment was discussed. And if recoupment is necessary, the IEP team had that conversation and discussed it. And we keep putting that message out over and over again. But your concern just lets me know we need to be louder about it and really continue to do so and make sure that everyone knows that we don't wait for a parent to have to bring it up. We don't wait for a teacher to have to bring it up. That conversation must be had at the IEP. So. Thank you. And then the last thing I wanted to say is to Pam's point, and I know that this has come up several times about the training for our staff on structured literacy. I just want you to know that that Leela has been started the work, and we've discussed this, that we will be training all of our RSP teachers in structured literacy intervention. We've got to get the ball rolling on that in terms of when it will occur, but we have started to look at our different providers and look at the supports that we will have, and we look to start that in the spring, hopefully in the spring of this year, to get that rolling and start it then. So just wanted to make sure we noted those things.
JP.
Yeah, just one real fast follow-up. The answer that I heard about interrupted, like going out of the country and coming back, I would compare that to the pandemic for some of these kids. And you might want to look at the data set through the lens of how do you look at the interrupted learning, because it really was. And so even though you're not going to another language, the language in another country, the language at home might be another language. And so it's very much interrupted. And I strongly suggest that we use that lens to scope it out.
Thank you. I'll definitely look into that as well. It's something I need to learn more about.
Please.
Hi, John. I just wanted to make one other point and kind of link on to what Dr. Luna was talking about recoupment discussions during IEP team meetings. One of the things that we did as a district was to add an entire section to the IEP that is called Section N, where that discussion has to take place as part of that IEP team meeting. So just to remind parents as well that Section N is where that discussion takes place. I'm really a little bit confused that the IEP was able to be ended without having that discussion because that was put in place for that purpose.
Now, actually, the team wanted to end it, for me personally, the team wanted to end it. And thankfully, the team leader, who was pretty new to the job, excellent at that job, said, you know what? No, we're not going to just wait till the next IEP to address that. We're going to recess this, and we're coming back next Tuesday, and we did. And so when the parents know enough to ask for it, or when you have the internal advocate, makes all the difference in the world. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Well, let me thank you so much for the presentation, and Med, thank you so much. You know, if anybody would ever tell me that committee meetings don't have a purpose, I'm going to have to say something because we have gotten so much information and so much, it's just marvelous, and I appreciate all of my panelists. All of you, really, how would we ever learn this if you didn't ask these questions? So committee meetings count. Isn't that right, Mr. Tchaikovsky? I hear you. Okay, thank you, everybody. Really, I'm so proud. I'm so proud to run the committee, honestly. Okay, now I'll calm down a little bit. And now we are going to go to item number 2. And that is Dr. Maribel Luna, our Senior Director, and she'll introduce herself, and she'll get us started on the Special Education Action Plan, the strategic plan.
All right.
Sure.
So, good evening, everyone. Today, I'm going to be reviewing the Special Education Action Plan. There we go. So let's try this while they're, all right, perfect. Special Education Action Plan. I am Maribel Luna, Senior Director for the Division of Special Education. So as you probably all know, the LAUSD has a strategic plan that we're putting in place and for the next 4 years. And the goal of this plan is to ensure that all of our students graduate ready for the world, ready to thrive in college, career, and in life. Is it missing? There we go. The strategic plan has these pillars included. There are 5 pillars. They include academic excellence, joy and wellness, engagement and collaboration, operational effectiveness, and investing in our staff. And these elements are not meant to be separate from each other. They're meant to work together so that we can provide our students the best opportunity possible. And so, the Division of Special Education worked on an action plan to correlate with the strategic plan. This is not, and I'm going to share it with you today, but I want to preface this by saying these are not the only goals we will be working on. These are not the only priorities, but these are some goals that we've put together. This is our action plan that we've put together to align with our district's strategic plan. And our action plan works towards high-quality instruction, eliminating opportunity gaps, college and career readiness, social and emotional skills, and welcoming learning environments. So I'm going to go through some of these with you. We have 2 parts to it. The first part is the goal for year 1. The second part is the goal within 4 years. And so our first one, and you'll see there it includes every one of our action plan goals comes from the strategic plan and is related to the pillar and the strategy. So if you see the first one is academic, it falls under the academic excellence pillar. The priority is high-quality instruction, and the strategy is part of the strategic plan, which is to deliver impactful, rigorous, standards-based, culturally responsive, and inclusive instruction supported by high-quality curricular and instructional materials in all content areas. So for the Division of Special Education, what we've committed to for this first year, 22-23, and what measures we're going to use is to move students in grades 3 through 8 an average of 10 points closer to proficiency in our testing, in our SBAC, in math, and 10 points closer to proficiency in English language arts. And that is commensurate with the goals of our general education partners. For the 4-year goal, we're planning to go 50 points closer to proficiency for math and 40 points closer in ELA. And, whoop. All right, how we're gonna do that is we're gonna increase the student use of universal and designated supports during testing. So during testing, there are supports that can be included for the student that are embedded into the test, such as font size, such as color contrast. Some of our students with disabilities may need this, and such as read aloud. So we're gonna make sure that our staff is aware of these supports and that they utilize them and make sure our students utilize them when needed. We're also going to promote and increase the use of interim assessments and progress monitoring. So we don't want to wait until we get the results of the test to realize, hey, we didn't meet this goal. We want to make sure that we're progress monitoring along the way and really work with, am I doing that? And work with our staff to make sure that they have the right tools to do so. We're also going to increase the use of evidence-based practices for students with disabilities. What that means is that we're going to continue our PD and really, again, shout from the highest mountaintops about structured literacy intervention and how we can support our students with that. The next goal is also under the pillar of academic excellence, and this is, the priority is college and career readiness. And we're looking to accelerate opportunities for career exploration, post-secondary pathways, and employment, including collaboration with local government and private industries to provide paid internship and apprenticeship opportunities for our students. And so how we're going to do that, and our commitment for the 22-23 school year, is to increase the number of students with disabilities who are pursuing post-secondary competitive employment or higher education to at least 64%. And our goal for the 4-year metric for 2026 is to increase that to 75.3%. So how are we going to do that? We're going to expand our hiring program. It's called our BOOST program for our buildings and grounds workers. We're very excited about this. We worked with our CTC, our Career Transition Centers, and our Personnel Commission to have a program whereby we can hire our own students, and I know we've talked about this several times, but where we can hire our own students to come back to the schools and support our schools and be part of the B&G worker program. So very excited about that. We got that moving, and we want to expand it. We want to be able to do more of that with our students. And we want to also implement, we're working on a plan to implement this for our early education centers to get some aids there. So to get our former students to apply and be aides at our early education centers. That is our next step there as well. And then we're working with our Personnel Commission very closely to see if there are other LAUSD positions where we can also start a program and do this with, because we think it's really important. It helps everybody involved to get our students back into our school systems, supporting our future student, right? Our future adult students and with what they do. So very excited about those, and we know that these programs will help us meet our goal. So the next goal that we have in our plan is to eliminate opportunity gaps. It falls under the pillar, again, academic excellence. The strategy is to create a learning environment that promotes inclusive education for students with disabilities, to foster higher expectations for academic, social, and vocational outcomes. So what our commitment for this year is to increase the percentage of students with disabilities who are in the general education program at least 80% of the day, to 62%. So we want them in the general education program. If it is an appropriate fit for that student, we want them in the general education program for 80% of the day, and we want to increase that to 62%. again, if it is an appropriate fit. By 2026, we want to increase that for 80 for 80. That means 80% of our students with disabilities will be in the general education program 80% of the day if the IEP team deems that a good fit, because we know when it is a good fit that we have great success there for our students, and we want to make sure that we're working towards that goal and that that goal is front and center for all of us. So how are we going to do that? We are going to provide professional development to our staff to make sure that they can provide LRE, the least restrictive environment, to our students. We're also looking at providing, we have some inclusion schools. A few years back, there was a side letter. The side letter included a certain number of schools that were committing to inclusion. So we realize and recognize now that some schools are farther along in inclusion than others, and we really need to provide the supports based on where they are. So it doesn't matter that you've been in inclusion school for 5 years, because all our schools are technically inclusion schools, right? But it's where is the work and how much support do you need? And because on paper it says, hey, I've been in inclusion school for this long, it doesn't mean that there is not supports needed. A school who's been really working and submitted an inclusion plan and has been doing this for 1 year can possibly be at the same place that a school is that has been in our inclusion program for 3 years. And we need to tier those supports based on their needs, as opposed to saying, well, they've been doing this for a while. We need to really make sure that we tier those supports. So we're going to work on that. We have also are very excited about this, and we've started our series for our kindergarten teachers, a PD for our kindergarten teachers, because we find that what happens, and many times when our students are placed in a restrictive program early on, they don't exit. And so if we're providing our kindergarten teachers those supports, those behavior supports, those instructional strategies to make sure that our students really are successful in the general education program, then we can keep them in the general education program longer. So very excited about that. We recently had one on a Saturday. There was a series of 4 PDs that we're having, and we had over 100 participants, and we expect to keep expanding the number of participants and providing those supports. So the next initiative falls under Joy and Wellness and Strong Social Emotional Skills. And our commitment for the first year is to increase the percentage of students in elementary school, middle and high school that will demonstrate growth in social emotional learning, competencies of growth mindset. So self-efficacy, self-management, social awareness, et cetera. And we want that to increase by 2% this year. We're going to gauge that. Our metric of success will be the school experience survey. And over the 4 years, we want it to increase by 8%. And how are we going to do that? We are going to train our teachers on strategies to make sure that students with disabilities participate in their IEP. Not just in high school, but we're also going to work to have our elementary school students participate and have it be appropriate participation. We talked about students really knowing what they're good at, knowing what they need supports with, and knowing what we can help with, and being able to vocalize that. And so we're really going to work to support our students, to train our staff, to be able to support our students in doing so. We're going to develop guidance to IEP teams regarding student participation. We talked about producing a student-led video on how to participate in the IEP team, and also selecting our students to participate in this video creation for it, so that we can then post that on our website, have this information out to everyone there. We talked about, like, with elementary school students, we've generally been, we generally don't invite them to the IEP, but we talked about we could have that conversation, whether it be the teacher having the conversation prior to the IEP with a sentence stem saying, here are some things I feel I need help with, here are some things I'm really good at, here are some things I appreciate, so that they can have their voice at the IEP as well and be prepared to share just a few things out. And they may not necessarily need to sit through the entire IEP, but they can come in and participate and have a voice, so that we teach them early on that this is their education and they are definitely a part of the decisions being made for their education. And then I believe this is the last one, the engagement and collaboration. and this is welcoming learning environments. We want to really enhance and streamline our school websites, our communication channels, social media, to improve community access to our programs. So we are happy to announce that we have a Twitter, and so please follow us. Twitter account now, it's LAUSD SPED. And we just, I think last week, got it going, and we plan to keep updating it and adding information. Our commitment is to increase our primary website usage by 5% this year, and to increase our social media reach and engagement by 2%. So just really have been working on that. We did revamp our website, I think about 1.5 years ago, but there's still room for improvement. We still do communicate, our CAC lets us know what things are, a little difficult to access, and they go on there and say, well, this is too many steps to get to this. And so we are working on making changes as needed to our website as well. For the 4 years, our goal is to get to that website usage up to 20%, increase it to 20%, and increase our social media outreach by 10%. And again, please follow us on Twitter at LAUSD SPED. Do we have any questions?
Thank you very much, Dr. Luna. Before I turn over to the questions of our committee members, I have to say one thing, because as a teacher and a counselor and a principal, assistant principal and a principal, my goal was always to mainstream as much as possible my special ed kids into gen ed classes, but very carefully done, very carefully done. I would work with our bridge coordinator. Certain teachers were perfect for welcoming kids into their class to be mainstream. Other teachers were not as welcoming. So we picked the right teachers and had the right supports. They just can't come into the room and say goodbye. You have to have them with support, special ed aides or BIIs, whatever, to make their trip successful. And when you plan it out carefully, they do have a successful time in the gen ed classes. I just want you to know.
Absolutely agree, and we really want to make it a culture of they're all of our students, not, I don't know, they're not my students. They are all of our students, and we work together to do so, but they do need to have the appropriate
It's
supports.
true. The principal and the special ed staff at the schools know who the best people, teachers for mainstreaming are, and that's how it is, and it's true. And I want to make sure that they're successful in their movement into gen ed.
Our goal is to have everyone be excellent at it.
Oh, I hope so too. I hope so too. But we all know our own schools and we all know our own people. Okay, go ahead.
Just to add to that, we are also working with human resources on developing a kind of a badge system where someone would get enough PD training, our gen ed teachers specifically, to have the background to, as Dr. Luna stated, ensuring that they're all our students, right? So just because they're with Mr. Schmerlson during most of the day, but they're coming to me for science, they're still my student, and I know how to also work with them when they have or exhibiting behaviors that are typical of students with disabilities.
I hear you. And training is of the utmost importance, but I'll say it one more time. As the principal, I knew the perfect person where this child could go into and be successful. I mean, that's why I was the principal of the school, I think, because I kind of knew my staff and I knew what was best for kids. So thank you. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. Thank you. So we have our first question from Lisa.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you so much. Is it Dr. Luna?
Yes.
Thank you. So I do have a couple of questions, but I'm going to be respectful of others that would like to talk also. I have some concerns of the fact that we have a severe shortage of special ed teachers and special ed assistants. And I am really concerned about the, I really appreciate that we're looking at standard-based, culturally responsive curriculum. In my 18 years of teaching, I've never seen a special ed curriculum brought into my classroom for a special day class. And we're just always given the gen ed curriculum and then magically accommodate it and fix it. It would be so beautiful to see an actual curriculum that works for our students. I'm talking specifically SLD. That's my purview. That's where I've spent all of my years. So it'd be really great to actually see a curriculum that supports the standards, the instruction of the standards to students with learning disabilities in an SLD class, whether that's autism core or just straight SLD. I do have another question, though, also on least restrictive environment. I'm also, as Mr. Schmelson says, you know which teachers you should be sending or would work with your students who need that help in mainstreaming. My concern is inclusion, I think, is also a beautiful thing for the right students and the right teacher. But when we remove LRE from offering the LRE at an IEP meeting because there are no special day SLD classes left because everything's been turned into an inclusion class, I feel like you're removing an environment that is more conducive for some students than others. So while it is admirable to consider inclusion for all students, and it's a beautiful thing to think about that because they are in this world and they need to be included. But we talk about a small class setting for a reason. Some students cannot cope in a large class of 35 or 40 students. And parents are not given that opportunity, especially if they don't know how to advocate for themselves when it comes to an IEP meeting for transition to middle school. And all they're told is, well, there's this school or this school, but it's full inclusion because there are no more special day classes. That parent doesn't know to say, well, that's not what's best for my child. Or maybe the teacher doesn't want to speak up and become in a situation where they disagree with administration. So I still think we need to protect small class settings for students, and our parents need to be educated that they can request an SLD if that's the most appropriate placement, and not just pushing everybody into a full inclusion setting. I'm going to reserve any other time after some other people have spoken, but that's where some of my concerns lie.
Thank you. So the Division of Special Education is also concerned that we have a shortage of special education teachers and classified staff, and we are working with our personnel partners and HR partners to try and remedy that. But definitely a concern, and that's across the nation at this point. So I hear you on that. In terms of the curriculum for SLD or core classes, those students are on the core curriculum, and so we're looking more at strategies to provide for those teachers, and I think that we could do, and we are looking to do a better job in providing consistent strategies that can be used consistently across our SLD classes and our core classes that are using the core curriculum, but maybe we can provide, and we are looking to provide more strategies that can be consistently used, and then the monitoring and support of those strategies. Because we have PDs, right? But you might attend a PD, your partner does not attend a PD, somebody doesn't. So we're looking to provide consistent PD that's consistently attended by our SLD teachers, and then the support and the monitoring of that. And then in terms of the inclusion, absolutely do agree that we need to provide the inclusion opportunities to our students. The placement is always an IEP team decision, and we do still have special day programs. Our special day programs, any of our programs, are always based on the need. They're based on the need for that area, program need, student need. And so if the need is for a special day class and the IEP team agrees that that is the placement, then there will be a special day class in that area for the student to attend. It's not always at the same school because we can't have every program at every school, but there is a program available within that area for that student. I just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Carl.
So we come up with a messaging like ready for the world because it drives results. So I think we need to be really careful about how that message is constructed. So you said that all the children should be ready for college, ready for career, and ready for life. By including that "and" in there, you're excluding a whole segment of our LAUSD population. Children like my daughters who the goal of their education was for them to reach their full potential, and it wasn't necessarily academic. So I ask that we be a little more careful with that, because when we end up with a culture where special education centers are subject to closure, or special education classrooms are eliminated. You said that the placement is always an IEP decision, But I know of parents in the Valley who are moving from middle school to high school and could not get an ART-Core program because none of the schools in the Valley were providing it. So when we do that, we're hurting a whole segment of the population. And I want to know how we're, when we set goals for inclusion like you specified, how do we make sure that special education students who it's not appropriate for aren't swept up in this just to make a goal?
So I think I've already answered that, but I'll say it again. It is an IEP team decision. We do have programs available throughout the district, and we do have them in all of our areas based on program need and student need. I just want to really reiterate, though, that the data does show that for students whom it is appropriate for, inclusion really helps them be successful in life in general. When we put students in a restrictive environment who can be in general education, we limit sometimes the success that they can have. And we want to make sure that for all of our students, we're really looking at their individualized needs and the supports. And we have seen it over and over. And, when we go and visit these classrooms, when our students, and that's why we're so excited about the early start, the UTKCCs, the kindergarten students, when they are with their general education peers, they have those models, they tend to do better. The expectations that our staff sets are also higher. And so for any of those, and we are behind in the number of students that we have in our inclusion, participating in full-day inclusion. And so that 80 for 80 is a good goal to have. I hear the concerns, and I've heard them, and definitely take them to heart that it is not for all students, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that it's really important that we do this for those students that could benefit from it and should have that opportunity to benefit from it.
Pam, okay.
Okay, so I think there's some consensus here up here about these questions and concerns about inclusion. And I have a specific comment, but maybe, Scott, this can be, maybe there can be a whole other meeting. Topic that's like pros and cons of inclusion and some statistics and experiences, because I think it's pervasive, at least I'm hearing in the district. I keep hearing inclusion, co-teaching, et cetera. And so I speak from with wearing my other hat as the itinerant art teacher in LAUSD, and I am, always asked to, can you please include the special day class in your regular classes? And, or sometimes the principal just schedules it. Not always as sensitively as you might have. And, so what I have found in my experience as an art educator is sometimes it's so much more beneficial for the students for me to go into a special day class and tailor my instruction to give them an art experience. Because the reverse, my understanding is, it's the social experience to be with the other kids, which is also really, really important. So like balancing that. And then the experience I've often had when the kids are included in for the art class time is it's not thoughtfully done, and it's not beneficial to the kids. So they come in, they're in a corner of the room. Maybe the lesson really isn't even appropriate for them because of motor skill issues or different kinds of things. So I think, as everybody says, it has to be more very thoughtful about how we do it. And then I really would like to maybe propose a future discussion of like benefits of special day class benefits of inclusion?
Definitely, I think that we could benefit from that. I just wanted to, what you described and having them in a corner, et cetera, is exactly what we don't want to happen. And it's not only for social emotional. We've had, particularly we had at CSUN, there was a panel that talked about inclusion and their work that they'd been doing. And we had 2 math teachers there that were working together, co-teaching students with disabilities in general education. And it really touched me because one of the things they said is our students with disabilities are scoring higher on some of these tests than our students in general education. And just hearing it from the field, like we're working on this and we're letting our students know they can do this. So it's not only, and we have to get away from that, it's not only, that's important. The social emotional part is absolutely important, but it's not only for that. And so I think, more awareness and more of the why. And then if we could go to Dr. Hanratty, because I think she had her hand up earlier. I don't know if you still have a question or comment. And then I know that Leela Rondeau also wanted to make a comment. So.
Sure.
Passionate topic.
And then, so I had a couple comments about this conversation. So the vast majority of my professional work has been in inclusive education, and I certainly am excited to see the ambitious 80 by 80% number. And this really represents over almost 40 years of research demonstrating that one of the greatest predictors for student success following their K through 12 education is the time they spend in general education. I want to remind my fellow committee members that all of our students per IDEA are general education students first, and special education is services and supports layered on top of general education. And so we really need to make sure that all of our students have that access first before we consider more restrictive placements. And unfortunately, we have a long history of our default placement is away from general education, and then students are put in a position of earning a right, which is the opposite of the way that the law is designed. So that's my comment. I have comments about some of the other goals too, but I'll just stick to inclusion for now. I guess my comment is more just I want to make sure that there's 2 low incidence groups that I want to make sure are considered under that 80%. So one is students with extensive support needs. I know that sometimes we assume when we're talking about inclusion that we're talking about students with less extensive support needs, and I want to make sure that those students are part of the district plan to make sure that that is a full consideration in every IEP, and of course it's an IEP decision. The second group that I want to make sure is considered, and I'm sure that Mr. Bowman has additional comments given what you were sharing earlier, is students who are in those deaf classes that are using American Sign Language. And I know that there is a recent initiative related to increasing access to American Sign Language-based classrooms, and so I want to make sure that these initiatives aren't in contradiction to one another. And so, and we have one of the only deaf education programs for teachers of the deaf in the state at Cal State Northridge, and I know that our faculty feel very strongly that this initiative focused on inclusion does not take away from that emphasis of the need for a language-rich environment for students who are deaf and hard of hearing.
Thank you. Appreciate that and took notes on that, and we'll definitely keep that in mind when we're working towards this goal.
Leela, before you go on, I just have a list of people who are waiting patiently, if I can get to them first, okay? Yolan, I think you are in Zoom land, right? Go ahead. All right.
I am. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Luna, for your presentation. It's refreshing to see the pillars and the strategic plan. There's some great things in there that I see, some things that I'm a little concerned about that are just not explicitly spelled out. And one of them is the family piece. And so I feel like we've talked a lot about different initiatives throughout the district, the BSAP plan, the EL reclassification, efforts to engage parents and families. And yet I don't necessarily see parent engagement as one of the pillars or as one of the strategic actions. And so just wanted to highlight that to maybe think about being a little bit more explicit about engaging, putting families and communities under that engagement pillar. The other one I wanted to kind of talk about was the video. So I see there's plans to create videos, particularly that reflect students. And so with that, I think I saw create a student-led video because of our great diversity and the role that culture plays. I think it's imperative that we think about creating multiple videos and thinking about making sure that the images in the videos reflect the students and all the students in our district. I know it wasn't this committee, but during the pandemic year when the LAUSD graduates were graduating in 2020, a video was created highlighting some graduates. And I'll just be honest with the committee, there was no one that looked like me in that video. And it kind of sent a subconscious message that people like me in LAUSD don't graduate. And we know that that's not true. So we just want to make sure that all of our videos reflect the media images, right? And the power of media, that they reflect the different people.
Thank you, Dr. Oops, sorry.
No, absolutely.
Yes,
I just want
you.
to say thank you, Dr. Smith. Appreciate that. And we'll definitely keep in mind that our videos need to reflect our student population. It's a very important point. And then to your point on parenting, on parent involvement, it's throughout our entire plan, but definitely for the increased website, increased social media, all of that, our target is our parents. But we constantly and consistently work on engaging our parents, and that's a goal that we will continue to work on throughout. And we work with our BSAP partners. We also have our CSIS team that is working very closely with them as well. We work together with our AMP partners, our MED partners, as you saw earlier, to ensure that we're working to provide what our families need and to support our families. But parent engagement is ongoing all day, every single day, and we will continue to work on that.
So true. Thank you, Yolan. Thank you so much. Next, we have my distinguished colleague, Jackie Goldberg.
I too am concerned about inclusion, but from a different point of view. I get calls, not all the time, but regularly, from teachers who say, things happen in my class that nobody told me would happen. I've had no training on it. I don't know what to do. And I'll just give you one example. In one history class, a youngster, and you've heard me talk about this before, started just screaming, just yelling and screaming. This teacher had no idea, she told me, whether she should take that youngster outside, not take him outside, try to sit with him and talk with him, try to calm. She didn't know what to do, and she felt terrible because she didn't know whether she took him outside, that was the wrong thing to do, it would make him feel bad about, you know what I'm saying? Yes. I'm really worried about the part of inclusion that lets our teachers know what might happen, what might be the best ways to deal with it. I hear that in some places it's happening, that kind of training is going on, but it's spotty. And I'm concerned about that because the youngster could be, in quote, mistreated unintentionally in a situation. And the teachers didn't want to do that. She was very clear, right, but she didn't know what to do. And I don't think we can predict everything that could happen, but I think if we know the type of disability of the kid in that classroom, a teacher could be told, here are things that might happen. Here's what we suggest if they do. You know what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely.
I don't think we're doing nearly enough to help teachers prepare for the outstanding thing that might happen in inclusion. Because when it doesn't happen, everybody's fine, everybody's happy, but then these things happen and they don't know what to do.
So there are two things there. There's the tiered supports that we talked about, right? There are schools at different levels that need different types of supports. There's also the district-wide PDs that we provide. So what I hear you saying is more, I guess, relevant to the tiered supports. Certain schools are going to need more supports in certain areas. We do provide district-wide PD. We do provide strategies for how to support students, and behavior is a big part of it because many times our students are placed in more restrictive environments due to behavior. Right. And some behavior is due to a disability, right? Others, other behavior may not be, but really knowing that and knowing the triggers and knowing the strategies that can be used for that individual student is important. And sometimes, and I'm going to bring it back to, because we don't have so many students or as many students as we need in inclusion. Sometimes the teachers are just frightened of what they don't know. I don't know how to do this. I don't know, I have no idea. I've not been trained on this. And so we're working to not only roll this out, along with the rollout of and the implementation, we have to provide those supports. And so I hear you with that. We have to provide the supports in the PD so that people feel empowered and so that it becomes the norm to be able to support these students in the general education program. We've got a ways to go, but we have to start and get moving on it, and that's what we're doing.
And specifically, I think it has to be tailored to the kids that the teacher has, because some of the general professional development gives them a broad general understanding, but it may not necessarily connect to the specific disability of the specific kids in my particular fourth period. And that's what I'm really trying to get to, is how do we make it more specifically usable for the teacher? The general PDs are helpful, but that's not what I'm really looking for.
Let me, if I could chime in here, a couple of things. And the tier support that we talk about is really, it ties back to what Ms. Cohen said earlier that happened to her as an itinerant. There has to be an opportunity where someone who is the case carrier of that student that's having this conversation where that teacher is going or that student is going into, right? So it shouldn't be a novelty for you, Ms. Cohen, to see these students. That someone should have spoke to you. These conversations and those two teachers should already be working together. Otherwise, you don't know which way to go. So there has to be more opportunities, tier support, co-planning to make sure you know the disability. These are behaviors. These are some strategies. You see it well at one of your schools at Southgate High School, which is a school, I think the mathematics program that we talk about. The planning cannot be ignored. It actually leads to that success of the student.
I would just add that I absolutely agree that we need a lot of professional development on this topic, and we've been partnering with Division of Instruction as well, because a big piece of this is having Tier 1 supports. So we might need to change the way that we teach in our classroom in order for other students to come in. Some of our strategies that we've been using in classrooms are old-fashioned, frankly, and there are ways in which that we can improve upon what we've been doing for all of our students, not just our students with disabilities. Small group rotations benefit everyone. Universal design for learning can benefit everyone. Differentiation can benefit everyone. You don't have to have an IEP for that. I'm super passionate about this topic, so I'm going to try and keep brief. I would love to have us focus on this again. Right before the pandemic, we were actually going to have a discussion about this at the Special Education Committee. Just a couple of other quick things. Just wanted to point out, since we are talking about the 80 for 80, that is derived from the state of California has set a goal. The expectation for every district in the state of California is to have 70% of students with disabilities in their general education classes for 80% of the time or more. So yes, our goal is slightly more ambitious than that, but that is coming straight off of the state. And the reason the state has that goal is because when you look nationally, California is woefully behind when it comes to inclusion. And actually Florida, where our superintendent comes from, has been at the top of the curve in terms of promoting this. So we're excited to have him here.
That's wonderful. Before we go on, may I ask?
No, I think there was a comment.
But we have one more person, and then we'll take his comment. Our Deputy General Counsel, Deneen Cox, go ahead. I'm trying to keep people in order. You got it.
Thank you,
Okay,
thank you.
You got it.
So, Mr. Smolson, I wanted to agree with Ms. Cohen and Dr. Hanreddy and Ms. Rondeau that our parents really would benefit from a specific topic on this as well to delve into this issue. I just wanted to make one point, and Dr. Luna made it, that there is no one-size-fits-all program, that this is an individualized determination made by IEP teams. But I wanted to ask Dr. Luna or Ms. Rondeau to explain when we say inclusion schools, what is our definition of that? Because inclusion is, it's not a new concept, that we've been doing this forever, and it's an opportunity that's available at all of our schools. But when we say inclusion schools, What is that definition?
So I'll start, and then if Leela wants to add, we can have Ms. Rondo add. So we expect all of our schools to implement inclusion to the extent that they can at their schools and to the extent that they can support it. However, we do have a group of schools that submit a plan, and this plan is their commitment to go school-wide inclusion, meaning that all of their students will be included in the general education population. The goal is to have all of their students included. They may start with one grade level and work their way up to have all of the grade levels eventually, but they do have a plan that they submit. They do have additional supports that we provide, and we work closely with them in terms of if they call us and say, we need this PD, but their commitment is to follow this plan and to have their students included in the general education population. Leila, am I missing something?
I think you hit it, but it's all of our schools are working on increasing inclusive opportunities for students. These schools have submitted a written plan outlining how they're getting there specifically.
Okay.
And if I could just ask one more
Sure,
question
of course you
about that.
may, of course.
So the plan would not be something that happens overnight. It's time-driven, right?
Yes, yes, it's a plan. It's submitted yearly, it's updated yearly and submitted yearly, but the plan extends over a certain number of years. They work with their stakeholder groups, they work with their parents, and they come together, parents, teachers, other staff, and they come together with this plan, send it in, we review it, we support the plan, and then we follow up with them on how's it going, what supports do you need from us, et cetera.
And Deneen, I have those schools in my district too, full inclusion, and it takes time. The first year was kind of difficult, but this year it's just wonderful. So it just takes time to happen. Mr. Bowman, followed by Ms. Bedford. Go ahead, Mr. Bowman.
So thank you very much for the presentation. It was amazing, and I had a question regarding when you referenced the data, the surveys, the pathways, the opportunities for careers. With the assessments, AMP, when I was looking at all that, I felt that there was some information missing regarding a specific mention of the deaf community or ASL as its own language. I feel that there's not enough coverage for that community because we need inclusion for them as well. For the educational program, the students who make up that program, they have other disabilities in general ed and special ed, and you all are aware of that. But there's a large community with deaf specifically who cannot use their voice. And for those individuals, would they be in the program? Are they getting assessments? Are they getting opportunities? Are they developing proficiencies in communication? Is there support for their language, ASL? So they are not going to be successful in the program without that. It's not simple enough. It's not enough to simply work in a general way in a bi-disciplinary strategy, but there would have to be something specifically to individuals with disability who are deaf. So social media, videos, there's no caption, let's say, on the social media. There's no signing, there's no interpreting. And so individuals who are deaf who would try to be engaged or included in that wouldn't see themselves represented. They wouldn't have access to the content. They wouldn't understand the programs that are on offer. And so they wouldn't be able to really participate in the variety of activities that the school's offering. So there would be a lot of lost information. Classes tend to be large for them, and so honestly, we don't support them enough. The graduates tend not to have support. From elementary, they go to middle school. From middle school, they go to high school. And then after that, there's really nothing. And so they kind of just get fast-tracked or treadmilled from one grade level to the next. And so we don't want to just, what's that? We don't want to make it up as we go. And so the deaf community, as individuals in the deaf community access this information, there really needs to be a bridging so that there's not this gap between them where the things are not being captioned. When it comes to association with students who are deaf, they have that language access. But when it comes to the rest of the school, they're kind of at a loss. They don't speak. And so when it comes to their ability to communicate, there are things that are lost. They tend to be manual, and so sometimes the school thinks, oh, well, okay, let's provide something like gardening, let's provide something like arts and crafts. But if the students aren't made aware of what programs are available, they're really going to be done a disservice. They don't see sign language. They don't see their community at all in the promotional materials. So they may say, oh, okay, the parents might feel, well, there's an interpreter for my child. Well, that's it. And so it really leaves some feeling left out and sad. So the community needs to have a voice. For the deaf community, for the hard of hearing community, they need to be in that program as well. Without that, we can't reach the goal of inclusion.
Thank you. Thank you. Agree. And again, I'm going to say it, all supports and services are an IEP team decision. And so we need to make sure that our students are receiving their supports and services as per the IEP. And the IEP team works together to decide on those. The other thing I want to mention is Dr. Smith mentioned it earlier that, videos, social media, et cetera, need to be representative of all of our students, of our population, and that includes our DHH community. So we definitely will, make note of that and make efforts to include all our student populations in our videos to the extent possible. So thank you. And as Dr. Hanratty mentioned,
and that includes testing as well. The sign language needs to be there because everything is spoken, and everything is vocal. So we need to have that. We need to have deaf people, sign language included in our testing as well, because the students look at these tests and then they provide these, they provide the voice but no sign language.
thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bedford.
Hello, thank you. As a parent of a young man who is living with his own unique abilities, I've always had this idea, and it's kind of derived from him always wanting to feel like he was like all the other children, meaning the general ed population at the school. So as it pertains to inclusion and the social, emotional, or joy and wellness, as we're calling it now, I was always thinking that schools should develop that culture of diversity and learning and acceptance that includes the general ed students. I don't know a better way to say it than maybe, sometime when you're driving, you'll see adopt a highway. Maybe the general ed population can adopt, quote unquote, adopt the students at the school to kind of make them feel more included. They're not sitting in the corner. They feel like they're one of the gang. And it does a world of good, I believe, for that social-emotional piece, even academic performance. I mean, just holistically, it could help them a great deal.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And we do encourage our schools, they're saying, we don't know, give us some ideas of how we can increase our inclusive opportunities. What can we do? We say, have a program at recess, have the buddy program. We have our champions programs that can come out to the school and help the students play sports together and really organize that together. You don't have to do it all overnight. It is a process, but we just want the commitment that we're all going to do this and increase our inclusive opportunities, because you hit it on the head. It's about how the student feels about themselves, and they want to be a part. They should be a part. They're all of our students of our school campuses. So absolutely appreciate your comment. Thank you.
And because, I can just remember my son riding the school bus. I wanted him to ride the school bus as a parent because of safety, but he wanted to ride the regular bus just to feel like the other kids, but district policy would not allow him to ride the regular school bus. But so when my son would get to school, there would be a line for the kids to follow going across the yard, but my son would take off another way because he did not want to be seen with the other ones, because first of all, the bus was short, so everybody knows those are the special ed students, and it would just make him feel bad.
And we don't want students
Yeah.
feeling that way. We really want to work towards improving their self-esteem and their success. And we've heard many stories of that. And when we get into our presentation and go more deeper into the research and the details, we'll definitely touch on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. So true. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I noticed in our audience, we have somebody very special. Oh, don't turn around. You can't turn around. The very special, would you come up, special guest, Carla Estrada? Would you come up, please? And I'll tell you who Carla Estrada is. Carla Estrada is our deputy superintendent, newly arrived. I guess she's our newest wonderful person at LAUSD. This is day one. Okay, perfect. Perfect. So I'd like to give Carla a few minutes to speak. You were not here at the very, very beginning of the meeting, right?
No, I got in, no.
So
Sneaked in the middle.
I encourage you,
Yes,
because the
sir.
beginning was the best part of this meeting, I'm telling you. I'm encouraging, it's taped. You should watch it and listen to the questions that were asked and the problems that were solved. So tell us about yourself, Carla, please.
Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to be able to join, and thank you, board members, for inviting me to be able to join and be a part of this. So Carla Estrada, new team to the district, but definitely returning as an actual graduate of LA Unified School District. And I spent 20 years in LA Unified before I left to work in other school districts. But my primary work my start is as a special educator. And so I've been a paraeducator, and I was also a special education teacher and worked in the Division of Special Education for a very long period of time. But I've always had my hands in different kinds of work, and working in instruction, working in social emotional supports, and so glad to be here as the Deputy Superintendent of Instruction. And so I get the great pride of working with our Chief Aguilar here, as well as Maribel. And what I'm really also want to take the opportunity to be able to say is I'm here really to also spend some time really learning and listening. It's exciting to be able to come back to a place that you know so very well, but our children change every year. Our communities change all the time. And so it's important for me to be able to come in and listen carefully as we also think about our superintendent's strategic plan and the board members' strategic plan, and how do we plan to enact it and also meet our targets and goals for ensuring every student in this district is successful. And so, and that can look in different ways for many of our different students. And so their ability to thrive is something that is the goal and the ultimate focus for us. And again, that can look very differently. And so please share bright spots with me. I'm really trying to understand where things have been working, from inclusion to making sure that we offer the spectrum of LRE supports and services for our students. And so as I continue to spend my time here after day one, is really to be able to understand where we need to go. So thank you so much.
So Carla, before you go, I was very touched with your story about continuation school. I am a big proponent of continuation schools. Can you tell us your experience?
I would be happy to, and it's actually where I spent my first day. I was able to go back to my elementary school, so I was able to go back to Ranchito Elementary, grew up in Panorama City, California. But I'm also a proud graduate of Einstein High School, which is a continuation school right next to Monroe in the North Hills. And so I did not have a traditional path, and I think it's really what has helped me define what I want to be able to create opportunities for others and our students as an educator. It was something that I was always thinking, what are some other paths that our kids can be able to really meet their greatest potential? And it's one that has served me well. And so proud to be back in the place I love.
I'm happy to have you. Thank you,
Thank
Carla.
you
And I
so
hope you'll come
much.
back to another one of our committee meetings. They're very quiet, or at least watch it on the reruns. You'll love it. You'll love it.
And it's important because I think what I really find is there's so many different represented voices. So I got to see who are the advisory committee, and I think those are the kinds of things that it's that richness that really helps us be able to formulate a good strategy that meets the needs of the diverse communities we serve. And so that's what
Well, I
I look
think you
forward
got
to.
the secret sauce because, Carla, just like I say, when we include kids, well, at least in my school, they were specially selected to be there. These people are all specially selected. They all have backgrounds and interests that concern special ed, and I feel they're experts in their field.
Exactly. Well,
So
that's
you know.
what it's going to take. It
Just
takes
so you
all of
know.
us to
Just
work
so you know. Thank
together.
you,
So thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
So I didn't forget about you, Chastity. I know, I see you there in Zoom land. I know you're next. Go ahead, Chastity.
Okay, jumping back to the prior presentation. First, I want to say that I have a kid who is in kindergarten, Haute Cour I'm super excited for inclusion because I feel like it's going to be built out for kids just like him. It's high functioning. But I want to jump to a very specific example of my fears for inclusion. Right now, I'm very excited about it. Last year when it came up, I was terrified because my son was in a school where they couldn't even ensure his safety. He was unsafe. And so the concept of inclusion was something that was laughable in my mind. Now that he's in a better school with a BII, with safety precautions, now I can actually, it's a pipe dream that might actually become a reality. And so I want to focus for a second on all of the parents that are kind of in a similar situation. Their kids are in a school that is not qualified to handle their type of special education that their child needs, or special needs that their child is not having met. And the fears that they have when they hear the term inclusion, because they can't even comprehend it, because at the space that they're at right now, they can't even see the special day classes being beneficial for their kids. Like they're just, so this concept is just like really scary for them. So I kind of want to hear thoughts on that.
Well, anyone? I knew you would. Go ahead.
I'll speak to that. Again, we need to make sure that our students have the appropriate support so that they can be included and be successful in the general education program. The last thing that we want to do is include our students in the general education program and then have them feel and have them be unsuccessful. That we need to make sure that things, their services, their supports, the PDs that the teachers need are in place so that our students are successful. And I'm excited about your excitement because I think it's going to be great for your students. So looking forward to that experience for you and your family.
Thank you, Charity. Thank you very much. Sylvia, any more hands up for questions? Yes, go ahead.
AP?
Dr. Amy, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about the social emotional goal, the one that was focused on student participation in the IEP and the use of the SDLMI, the Self-Determined Learning Model of Instruction. I don't know who, am I talking to you or Lula? I'm like, where? I don't know where to look. I'll start talking while you're moving. So I was just part of a pilot project focused on self-determination and students' participation in the IEP meeting, and I think that one of the biggest things that our group has found is the importance of student participation in their programs year-round, so that the IEP meeting itself doesn't just become like a one-time event for students that's not meaningful, right? We don't want it to be like this positioning where a student sits in the meeting and it's not meaningful to them. So I just wanted to kind of put a pitch that there are many great strategies, and the SDLMI is one, but to ensure that students are part of decision-making about their educational program all year long. And the other comment I just wanted to make about the specific mention of the self-determined learning model of instruction is that, because we were also implementing that, and that it is, it's an evidence-based program, but it can be pretty scripted, and actually some of the feedback that we got from students was that they found it not very exciting. And so I think that I would just encourage the district to focus on self-determination and not specifically one individual program for implementing self-determination across the district.
Thank you so much, and I have Leela here. She was leading our efforts in this, but appreciate that, Dr. Hanratty, and I know that we communicate regularly with our university partners, and so we'll be probably tapping you on the shoulder and saying, okay, what do you think about this, or how should we go about this? So really appreciate that information from you. But yeah, great point. We can't just have them show up to the IEP team and, okay, go ahead and tell us your needs, tell us your supports, et cetera. We need to train our teachers on how to prepare their students, and we should be doing this all the way through, not just with our students with disability, but our general education students as well, right? It's self-advocacy. What do I know? How well am I doing? What supports do I need? We need to teach our students to speak up and advocate for themselves. I say this all the time to my staff, that we need to advocate for those students who don't have people to advocate for them. But I'll add here that we also need to teach our students to advocate for themselves from a very young age, and that will be our goal. Did you want to add anything to that? Just say something.
Just that we're really fortunate to have really good university partners that are near us who do partner with us with great frequency. We have the pleasure of working with Amy regularly, as well as UCLA and Dominguez Hills. So I think that it's a very fair point, and just going based on past experience in transition services, we just know that our students do so much better in the world when they leave us, when they know how to talk about their disability in an empowered way.
Thank you. And I feel the same way about educating parents, too, before they go to an IEP, that they understand exactly what it's about. Yes, thank you so much. JP, I feel like you have a question. Is that so?
It's actually comments.
Comments.
You know, I called out the IEP situation at the beginning. I do want to do a shout out here at the end. But I want to mention the social media. Let's not forget the old-fashioned medium of TV. We have KLCS, PBS channel, and we should be using that more. And talking about different languages, the videos should have voiceovers of all the different languages. We should have ASL included with that. And you can call me when it comes to that, because that's one of our things for the CAC. That's a really big on our list for this year. And I happened to have gone accidentally last week searching around for special education information with LAUSD, and I had to be one of the first followers because I didn't know it was new. I just went out there and I followed it. I've been following it for the whole week. So
LAUSD SPAD.
It's hard to believe. I actually found it. And we do have Facebook page for the CAC. It's LAUSD CAC. And I was looking for content to put on our Facebook page. I want to give a shout out to Superintendent Carvalho. He knows me as Mr. Dad. He lets me call him, hey buddy. When he addressed the central committees with his 100-day strategic plan, my question to him was, can we have a 120-day strategic plan for special education? And, you know, he ruminated for a moment. He said, well, if you mean this and if you mean that, then yeah, well, we'll get that done. And then it's been more than 120 days, but he did it. We've got the strategic plan for the special education, and I wanted to give him a shout out and thanks, buddy.
Wonderful, wonderful. We count on you as our partners to help us achieve those ambitious goals that we put forth, so thank you.
Go ahead. Okay, thank you very much. Now, you know, we haven't forgotten about Charity, and we haven't forgotten about Jolyn. Now we're going to remember our people out there for public comment. So before we move on to public comment, I'd like to thank the staff, the Division of Special Ed, for assisting us in preparing today's materials. You too, Mr. McLean, we thank you so much for doing this, and Shanna Scott and her team, and for organizing this meeting, and the logistics, and the translation unit, the Spanish-speaking unit, the ASL unit. I mean, thank you. We can't do without you guys. I also want to thank my committee members for their participation and amazing, I'm just blown away, amazing questions. And I really do hope that district leaders take back these comments. You know, they're recorded, everybody, so you can watch it over and over again, so we can improve services and outcomes for our special ed students. So our next meeting will be next year, January the 4th. But we're going to send you a reminder, don't worry. January the 4th, 2023. Wow, at 5 o'clock. And thank you. And with that, Mr. McLean, public comment.
Let's do it.
Before you do that, I apologize. I have another meeting in another location, and I'm not going to be able to hear it, but I'll listen to your comments on the recorded messages, I promise.
I believe you. No problem.
And you can find that video recording at boe.lausd.net if you want to go watch the reruns. As
I call them reruns, yes.
Miho Morai, are you here? Miho Morai, if you are, come on up, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin.
I really hate.
Pull the mic.
Less than 3 minutes, so. Am I going? Do I just go? Okay. All right, good evening. My name is Miho Morai, and I'm speaking on behalf of the parents and students that I work with. I'm the membership coordinator and treasurer of CAPGA, the California Association of Parent-Child Advocacy. CAPGA is a statewide volunteer organization that is comprised of attorneys, advocates, and parents, and represents students with disabilities in all parts of the state, including LAUSD. I'm on the executive committee of the Community Advisory Committee, but today I'm speaking on behalf of myself and CAPGA. Thank you for holding today's meeting. First of all, I want to let you know that it is still very difficult to access this meeting online and make a public comment. Although I'm tech savvy, I had to come today in person, even though I'm sick, to ensure that I could make my public comments, since previously me and my other colleagues could not make our comments due to the difficult process of having to call in and being put on hold until it's your turn while simultaneously watching the meeting on a computer. Like other public meetings, we should be able to access the meeting online via Zoom and just be unmuted when it is our time to talk and not have to go through an arduous process just to make a public comment. Second, we have serious concerns about the lack of transparency about Mary Kellogg's role with the Office of General Counsel. The district should be more transparent about which attorneys in the OGC are responsible for special education matters. We would like to see published materials that clearly identify who is really running the special education office, because if we don't know who the key players are, systematic issues like the lack of consistent discussion of recruitment services IEP meetings for every family can never be meaningfully addressed. Many families are still unclear as to how and when they can access recruitment and compensatory services. While Division of Special Ed recently held a training advertised as dispute resolution, only 1/4 of the meeting was devoted to this topic. There was no discussion about recruitment or compensatory services in the training. Moreover, it's concerning that while the Division of Special Ed has trained APAs that these issues should be addressed at every IP meeting, that is not being consistently followed. With regards to the Special Education Action Plan, it is very disappointing that the Division of Special Ed has not provided the CAC an opportunity to review and make suggestions about the Special Education Action Plan. This action plan says nothing about preparing students for independent living. With the closure of special ed centers and the push for inclusion, how are we preparing our students for meaningful transition services? Also, while this action plan has an ambitious goal of training teachers on strategies to have students with disabilities participate in their IEP meetings, what are we doing to address the lack of participation of parents in the IEP process? There is an assumption that Zoom meetings are easily accessible, but that simply is not the case for the parents that I know who cannot independently access Zoom meetings due to language and digital barriers. The district needs to ensure that IEP meetings can be held in person. Finally, as a stakeholder in LD2, why is there no parent representation for LD2 on this committee, or for LD4 and 6? We need representation. Can I make some more? One more thing about ELD I do want to say, because that is the constituency that I serve. I know that there was a discussion about it, and one of the things is that oftentimes students with English language learners, their parents fill out the forms who don't speak English, and so their home language, they put Spanish, but the child doesn't speak necessarily Spanish, and so they're misclassified, and it takes years and years and years for them to be reclassified back to ED, or regular education, and so a lot of the kids that Pam, where did Pam go? Pam was talking about they're lost in the shuffles because they're not identified properly, because they're misclassified. So we really need to do a better job at really explaining to the parents, what did that mean? Like, just because your home language is Spanish, or just because your last name is, Spanish surname, it doesn't mean that you are an ELL. Because I remember when I was a teacher, a lot of my students were just placed there just because of their last name. And then it took years and years for them to get out because they couldn't read. And you know why they couldn't read? It's because they had dyslexia, or it's because they actually was intellectually disabled. And so we do need to make a better effort at really looking at these forms. So thank you. I'm so sorry that I sound so, but it's so hard to say all this in 3 minutes.
Thank you very much for your time. David Tokovsky, are you here? David Tokovsky.
Thank you very much. David Zukovsky, a former school board member of 12 years, teacher in the district secondary. And I want to thank Mr. Schmerlson for keeping this segregated committee going. I know there's a division, there's an instruction committee, and then there's a special ed committee. But you started before the instruction, so maybe they'll catch up and they'll eventually integrate. And so we won't have a committee with incredible minds here and incredible questions, both from staff and parents and others, but it will infuse instruction. It won't just infuse special education. And that's one of the things I learned 12 years on the school board is about special ed. It was about the biggest growth area for me in policy and politics and instruction was to delve into Chanda Smith, which was a 20-year consent decree. And if we don't learn from those 20 years of lessons, we may not have a superintendent alone. We may have a supraintendent if the federal courts were to intervene and put a special master, like has unfortunately visited other cities in the country and school districts. So great work. I think you really pulled out that recoupment concern, and I know General Counsel heard it very clear. We all know, because we have lots of doctors in education, more than the County General has doctors, but we know that we're a loosely coupled system, that the presentations in here are very good. They're very global and very helpful, but we need to drill down to how it actually couples. And that I would give Mr. Schmerlson the idea of also putting in two areas that we don't really have, and I've been listening to your committees through the internet, is we don't have the data digs here. We need some real specific numbers, not just percentages, because percentages can be a little bit tricky, but absolute raw numbers of kids and typologies of kids, and then you can talk about percentages. We also need budgets, because the disparaging remark always is that special ed is an encroachment, okay? That is a very prejudicial term, and anytime you hear it inside about encroachment, all of public education is underfunded, and therefore all of it is an encroachment, and we need to figure out what the budgets are. So we need the CFO here. The CFO may show up in other meetings, but the CFO doesn't show up in special needs. The data digs, the personnel. A lot of questions come up in here over each meeting about specifics on personnel. We have more graduate students in the LA metropolitan area who are going into debt. Psychology majors, 2,000 of them at UCLA doing masters and PhDs going into debt. I'm sure they'd rather be here. And if I can borrow, like my predecessor, another second or two. Of course. It's time to figure out summer session now, not in April. The summer session we have unfortunately run for special needs kids is the same one I think we did in 1967. And so we need to enrich that, broaden it, figure out some incredibly creative ideas. And the tutoring issue, that all this federal money linked to the recoupment question, I think the numbers are inflated when we hear in the news that 20% of the kids have been in tutoring. We need to drill down to which kids, and I know the superintendent is keenly aware that he wants to make sure he knows which kids are getting that. And finally, reminder that the law is search and serve. The discussions have been primarily about serving and catching up, but when we talk about general ed, we're searching. So not only is LA Unified at 60,000 plus special ed's the fourth largest school district in the state of California, special ed, it goes LA Unified, then the San Fernando Valley District is the second largest district, and I think Long Beach, and then LA Unified, 65,000 special needs kids is the fourth largest school district. We need to begin to look at child find requirements. Superintendent had an aspirational meeting yesterday at birth for 0-year-olds, But we need to be looking with pediatricians across the county where the district is at 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, and making sure those pediatricians and anyone who comes in contact with kids at 2 and 3 know that LA Unified has a rich array of services and professionals. Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you,
thank
Mr.
you, Mr.
Dutkowski.
McLean, for
Of
your
course.
generosity there. I owe you a minute.
Of course. Verenice Miron, if you're on the line, press *6 to unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin. Verenice Miron, oprima estrellita 6 para hablar, y tienes 3 minutos para hablar. Adelante.
Okay, good evening, members of the Special Education Committee. I want to express concerns regarding item 1. I am concerned that this is a slippery slope and has the potential to become a cop-out for the district to not provide students to what students are entitled to, which is a free and appropriate public education. Students with disabilities need to be provided with evidence-based interventions. And I'm concerned that this will become a box that will just be checked off during the IEP meeting. To the point that the previous committee members mentioned about recoupment services, section N of the part of the IEP, my own children's IEPs were closed without this discussion, and the box was marked off. There was no discussion in regards to them needing these services, and it was closed. So to say that it's not happening, I believe that it's happening and it's more widespread than you believe or you have been led to believe. So I think that a simple survey to special education parents might give you more of an idea of how widespread this is and how many parents are not being provided the opportunity to discuss recoupment services or compensatory services for their children. And in regards to the inclusion, I believe that what the district is doing is integration disguised as inclusion, and students are being dumped into general education classes without the proper supports for themselves and for students. And my last comment is more of a question, and if anybody can provide me a response, I would like to know under what part of IDEA does it state that services are provided depending on students' disabilities? For example, an inclusion specialist is only available for students in the alternative curriculum. So with that said, my last comment is I am signed up in the Blackboard messaging, and these meetings for specifically for the Special Education Committee are not shared in the Blackboard. So I think more parents would benefit specifically for the items and the presentations that were shared today. I know my community is predominantly Hispanic, so my families in my community can benefit from learning about the reclassification process for their students. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Darian Suprun, are you on the line? Darian, are you on the line? Seeing no Darian, this concludes public comment.
Thank you, everyone, for a fantastic Special Ed Committee meeting. Thank you.
Time is now 7:15.